This lesson focuses on variables and assignment statements. Now, you're already familiar with variables from algebra, and a variable in algebra is the unknown. It's usually called x. It's a letter. It's something that you're going to solve for. A variable in computer science is a little different. It's actually a storage location, and it also has a symbolic name associated with the storage location. So that means when you use a variable in one of your programs, you first have to declare it. So you're basically declaring a storage location, and you're giving it a name. You're associating a name with it so you can access that storage location. And you will assign values to that location. So, for example, this is declaring a string. It's a location to store the last name, and it's going to be of type string, which means it's text, someone's last name. You notice the variable name starts with a lowercase. The second word starts with uppercase. That's camel case. This is called lower camel case because it starts with a lowercase letter. Remember, a class name is written in upper camel case, whereas it starts with an uppercase. You can also have just one word names where you don't have to have anything uppercase. You can also use X or A or B just like you would in algebra, although generally in a computer science program you would not use a simple variable name like that unless you're doing something very simple. Usually you try to make sure that the name has something to do with what is actually stored in that location. For example, an hour is stored in there, or a minute, or whatever is actually stored in there. Now, there's something called a keyword, and a keyword that's a list of restricted words that already have meanings. They're reserved in Java and they cannot be used for variable names. For example, I could not name my variable string. I could not name it double or static. So you just have to remember those names are reserved and they cannot be used for variable names, but otherwise practically anything can. They usually have to have letters and numbers. Usually they don't have a dot in there. Okay. So an assignment statement, once you have declared your variable, you can put some value into that variable. For example, here, last name has been previously declared up here as a string, and I'm giving it the value Smith. That's the person's last name. I previously declared minute. Now I'm giving the value 2 to that location. So when I look at minute, it's going to be the value 2. I can actually put any kind of string in last name because it's declared a string. Remember, a string is just something that's between double quotes. This doesn't really make sense that somebody's last name could be 1, 2, 3, but Java would allow me to do that as long as I'm putting some string in there. They don't really care. Java won't really care what the string is. However, this case where it says last name equals 1, 2, 3 without quotes, that's invalid because 1, 2, 3 is actually an integer and last name is a string. You'll get a compiler error if you try to do that. And again, in this case, I'm giving the first name John, so this is John Smith. Now, there's something called the program state. Program state is generally at any certain time in the program's execution what the values of the variables are. And as you will see when programs get more complicated, this is very important to help you find bugs and to see what's actually going on in the program. And we already talked a little bit about printing out variables. We're going to do some of that next. Now, this is a simple Java class called variables. It's a very simple program just to show you what it looks like when you declare variables, assign them, and I'm going to print them out as well. Okay, so the first thing it does here is declare an integer x. It declares an integer a and b. Now, when I declared the integer x, I did not assign it a value. All I did was allocate a storage location called x, which I'll later use. When I declared a and b as integers, at the same time I declared them, I gave them a value. So I initialized those two here. X has not been initialized yet. As you notice here, there are some things showing up here. I happen to be using Eclipse right now, and Eclipse does tell me, it'll flag certain things before I compile them, so it's just telling me the value of A is not used, the value of B is not used. I know that, that's okay, we can ignore those little warnings just because this is a test program and I'm not intending to use them, I'm just showing them to you. Okay, also it shows here string declared as first name. Again, you see the lower camel case. Last name, you can just use regular lowercase if it's a one-word variable name. You can also put numbers in there. Okay, so here I declared a string message2. I assigned it to value hello. Here I declared a string message. I did not initialize it with anything. And here first line declared as a string, and it's assigned the value hello again. All right, so here, remember I said when I declared x, I did not give it a value. I didn't initialize it. Here I'm initializing it. Okay, so I'm going to print out X. That's all this program does. I declared X. I initialize it. I'm going to print it out. And we'll look at what the output is down at the bottom. See, it's now, remember, this is running in Eclipse, and it's complaining to me, there are some errors in there. Do you know about them? And yeah, I know. As long as I know what they are, I can ignore them because I'm kind of testing this. Remember, the errors were things that I declared, initialized, and didn't actually use. Okay, so there is the value of X printed out down at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this. Well, actually, I'm going to change this to print out A. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign A the value B. Okay, and now I'm going to try to run it and see what happens. Again, it's complaining to me. So again, what happened was A was originally 5, B was originally 3. I assigned A the value of B, so A became 3, and that's what you see down here. Okay, so now I'm going to actually get rid of all this stuff because we're not using this anymore. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the string variables I have. I have message defined as a string up here. I did not initialize it, so it has no value at this point. However, when I get down here, string at this line, string has the value hello. Next statement is assign the value to message 1, 2, 3. And again, it lets me do that because it's still a string, even though it's not a sensible last name. It's still a string. That's all Java cares about. So I'm going to actually print out what message is. It started out as hello. I changed it to 1, 2, 3. When I print it out, it should say message. The value of message is 1, 2, 3. And again, I'm ignoring stuff that I'm not using. I know what those errors are, so I'm ignoring them. Okay, so there it is. The value of message is 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens when we try to assign an integer value to a string variable, which is message. So remember, we said this should be illegal. The compiler should complain about it. It shouldn't run. So let's just see what happens when we do this. I'm going to run this. And again, it's telling me that there are some errors, but I'm thinking they're the errors I know about, so I'm going to ignore them. But look, there's actually an error that it can't run. It can't run because of this. This is more than just a warning. This is something that causes the program not to run because I'm trying to put an integer into a string. It tells me what line 19, that's exactly what I expect. And now, just to get an idea of the program state, I want to print out a couple other variables. I want to print out message 2 to see what it is, and I want to print out first line. So what happens when I run it? Okay, just what I'd expect. Message 2 is hello. First line is hello again, and the value of first line, that was the text I said to print out. So that was fine. What's going to happen if I try to print out something that's not initialized? What if I try to print out last name? So let's just put that in here and just see what happens. The value of last name. Okay, so let's run this and just see what happens. We should get an error because last name was not initialized. And let's see what it tells us. Okay, yeah, so it says the variable has not been initialized. It's explained about line 23. Line 23 has last name, just what we'd expect. We declared it, we didn't give it a value.